I just want to share a little correspondence with you here just after 9 o'clock news this morning. This one comes in from a friend in the Rupert area, and it says, when the precinct directors in Rupert went through the process of replacing Senator Dean Cameron, who moved on to the state insurance director position, several of us wrote questions to be presented to the candidates. Our question was, how do you feel about the Muslim resettlement in southern Idaho? And the writer says it was not included in the pool of questions to the candidates. And the writer says, I guess it was too controversial. We were just talking about this, how Steve Millington says, people in elective office are paying attention, whether they will say they are or not. The writer says, I am not holding out too much hope that the Republicans in this state will be of much help. The writer says they have their hands out and must be part of the payoff process. Then I have another message. This one comes in from a local resident, someone right here in the Twin Falls area, and says that there have been reports of white vans with obscured plates moving tandem through neighborhoods in Twin Falls, and also unidentified buses in the area. Now we know that the initial resettlement will take place. I mean, no one is stopping that initial goal of resettling 300 people here, which is coming up in just a few weeks. The date was given as October. So that's not going to stop. Of course, there is this conference on this issue tonight, which we have said is a really one-sided conference. It's all of the stakeholders in the refugee resettlement program trying to answer questions from the public. Now, will that change many minds? I don't think so. I think people have already reached a point where if you have an opinion in favor of it, it's because, you're a knee-jerk liberal and you always get on board with all of these things. And then you've got the people who are opposed because, well, you're always asking questions about security and you're asking questions about cost. And those two sides don't meet any longer in this country. It's just a matter, if you're an elected politician, it's just a matter of how many votes those sides can gather when it comes primary or election day. And, you're holding your finger up in the air and saying which way the wind is blowing. And at the moment, no one, I guess, in politics is really quite sure. I'll tell you what. The first individual who comes out and speaks for the side that is concerned about security as well as cost, you're probably going to do very, very well. Oh, you'll get made fun of by all of the newspapers in the state. A newspaper, I think it was out of Idaho Falls or Pocatello the other day, went rambling on in an editorial citing that Emma Lazarus poem, "Give me your tired, your poor." And again, lefties, that's not government policy. That's a poem. You got it? We don't run the country on poetry. Oh, I'm sure there's some lefties out there in academia who think we should. But I don't think it's going to be happening anytime soon. 10 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And you're up next. You're on the air.
You see, when something happens to your neighbor, like something like, say, for instance, he gets, toilet paper, or they do graffiti, or God forbid they break in, or anything like that, you always think, well, gosh, that was my neighbor. It's going to be all right for me. Well, one time when I had just bought a property and I was getting ready to move into it, we were robbed, and it was just some young kids. It wasn't this terrible, terrible thing. But I'm going to tell you, you feel exposed, and you feel vulnerable, and you really don't like it at all. And see, you never believe it's going to happen to you until it does.
Well, a lot of people have been converted from liberalism to conservatism because of that.
Exactly, and so, not that we want to hate. We love our fellow man. God created them. But you see, when they hate us, and you never know, and the refugees coming out of Syria, 89% of them are Muslim, 6.4 are Christian. Okay? That's a stat. Now, I have a list of the panelists for them tonight.
Sure.
And do you have that, or should I read it?
No, I've got it, but thank you anyway. We'll try to, we've mentioned it on the air on a couple of other occasions. I need to get to another caller here. 911, thank you much for chiming in. You're up next, and 911. Now, there's a number that, well, anyway. 52, you're up next on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. What's on your mind?
Good morning, Bill. Two things. First one is, why don't they have some sort of identification or color card for the people from Twin Falls County tonight, and anybody else, don't give them a card. Number two, in Jersey City, the school board over there decided not to cancel school for a Muslim holiday because there were between 5,000 and 10,000 parents who wouldn't have any place to send their children. At the same time, they don't let schools out for Jewish holidays. But somebody there in the audience says, pretty soon, we're going to be the majority. So that's the problem we're having.
And then they'll force that upon everyone. I thank you much for the telephone call. As I said, you've got people in political life, if they were to stand up and learn how to say no, you might see them do great things when it comes to polling numbers. I'm a believer that after what Ben Carson said on NBC on Meet the Press Sunday, that he himself is going to be one of those people who will benefit in the long run. No matter what his politically correct fellow Republicans are saying, no matter the screams coming from the Democrat Party and the screaming coming from all the memes in media. It's Carson on Sean Hannity last night.
I spoke with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser today, who's a moderate Muslim, and I asked if he could name a single Muslim country that treats women the way we treat women, or minorities the way we treat minorities in this country. He couldn't name a single one. Was that what you were thinking in your mind when you were answering the question? In other words, the way Muslim theocracies currently operate?
That's correct. I mean, they currently do not tend to operate the same way that our system does. Now, if someone has a Muslim background and they're willing to reject those tenets and to accept the way of life that we have, and clearly will swear to place our Constitution above their religion, then of course they will be considered infidels and heretics. But at least I would then be quite willing to support them.
Now, Carson said in his remarks on Sunday on Meet the Press he would not support a Muslim for president. And then Carly Fiorina comes out and says, oh, but the Constitution says there will be no litmus test. And even Ted Cruz, the Constitution says there will be no litmus test. Where in Hades did Mr. Carson ever say that constitutionally it should be prevented? He didn't say that. He just said, well, I wouldn't support one. Ditto. Come on, folks. Give us a break here. He's not saying I'm going to lock them all up and throw away the key. He's just saying he wouldn't vote for one. 9:15, you're up next. You're on the air on Top Story.
Hey, good morning, Bill. This makes me mad and also scared to death. We got a Muzzy leader in this country telling a presidential candidate that he should resign because of what he said. I mean, it is against the Constitution. They have Sharia law. We do not. I don't know what's going on with his people.
That's what Carson said, that if someone actually would say, I will follow the Constitution, then they have to denounce their religious faith.
Exactly. And then Carly to back up the Muzzies? Come on.
Well, I got to tell you, Fiorina thinks she's going to score a lot of points now. And media she's currently the media darling. I thank you for the call. She believes that somehow that, if she just continues along this path, the media will pat her on the head and say, all right, when it comes to the general election, we'll treat you the same way we'll treat Hillary. No, they won't. That's how they bluffed John McCain. That's how they bluffed Mitt Romney. And they'll do it all over again. And any Republican who buys into that notion is just ruining their own chances within the party. Here's another comment. This comes from, of all people, Joe Scarborough, who's one of the few Republicans. I won't call him a conservative. One of the few Republicans on MSDNC. He's actually the host of the show named after him, Morning Joe, although it's a bit of a grab bag, 6 or 8 different hosts every morning. And Scarborough was talking about this whole Obama is a Muslim thing and says, well, guess who originated that?
By the way, I got to say one other thing, too. It was rich this weekend. I guess we have to get our digs in on Hillary Clinton here, because I thought we were going to get through a segment without talking about her.
Oh, well, she's
but for Hillary Clinton to come out and criticize anybody for spreading the rumors about Barack Obama, when it all started
on 60 Minutes,
when it all started with her and her campaign passing things around in the Democratic primary? Rich. Now listen.
He says he is.
The Republicans are wrong for doing what they're doing. This started with Hillary Clinton, and it was spread by the Clinton team.
Spread by the Clinton team. So that's the origination of Obama is a Muslim. Hillary Clinton. Hey, quick note, and I don't want to disparage anyone, but somebody writes me and says, "Good morning. I'm wondering if anyone in the Twin Falls area west of the college are having produce disappear from their gardens." And then the writer says this: "My area has many immigrant housing projects." I don't know if they'd be out stealing your carrots. So I can't, I don't know that I could find a correlation there. You're up next. It's 9:17. You're on the air on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Oh, good morning, Bill. I know this has been beat like a dead horse, but I still think the comment about us having a Muslim president, we currently have one.
Well, and
we've had one for 7 years.
Here's somebody that's raising an interesting question about this. This guy who stood up and asked the question of Trump last week, and the guy said Obama was a Muslim. What's the name of that guy? This is a guy writing by the name of Jim Treacher at Daily Caller. He said, "No, seriously, what's his name?" He says, "I'm asking because nobody else is. Some people are speculating that the guy was a plant. I don't know if he was or not. Nobody does. That's the point. Nobody even knows his name, and nobody's asking." And he said, When Joe the Plumber stood up to Obama, everyone knew every detail of Joe the Plumber's life in 24 hours. This guy apparently might be working for Hillary Clinton's team, asking this question that way, and all of a sudden media's mum about who he is.
Well, my thing, I just look at our current president's, actions over the last 7 years. He appears to be very pro-Islam, Muslim, and his actions, his words are different, but his actions appear to be anti-Christian.
And he doesn't like Israel.
We can go down the whole list. So call me a theorist, whatever. I think we already have one.
I don't think he likes people of any religious faith. Think about the Little Sisters of the Poor and some of the other churches that he's oppressed with his Obamacare mandate.
Exactly. It's proven in history.
Hey, I thank you much for the call. And you've got people, of course, Christians right now. There's a judge in Oregon who might get removed from his job because he's refusing to perform certain marriage ceremonies. So I need to say more? But he's actually gone and asked the other judges to pick up the slack. He said, "I can't do it for my own beliefs." And he said, nobody's actually being denied a marriage. It's just he doesn't want to participate. Well, he will be forced to comply. Isn't that what got them in trouble at Sodom and Gomorrah? Bring them out so we may know them? Oh, but you see, if you believe that, you're just, that's all fiction and you're a big dumb dummy, right? You got to get with the program in American liberalism. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 87 today, and we'll have a day forecast later this week into the 90s. So at least a brief, at the moment, return of summer. And we've mentioned it before. If you've got a lot of windows in your home or your business, it gets mightily hot when it's hot outside and that sun is pounding against those windows. So we recommend window tints. And you can get those by calling Tint Lady. You can reduce the heat coming through the windows by 72%, and that means you can save on electric bills from that air conditioning unit chugging along. You really don't want that on in late September anyway, right? They do home window tinting, office window tinting, auto tinting, and paint protection, free estimates. You can set up an appointment by dialing 736-8469 or go online, tintladyidaho.com. Located at 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls, open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday by appointment only, closed on Sundays. And remember, don't squint, get tint. 9:23, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. It's 53. Thank you for joining us this morning. This whole notion of Carson saying he just would not support, he wouldn't be voting for anyone, a Muslim, for president. It's got all these people screaming, "Oh, but good golly, you can't say that. You've got to have your tongue yanked out, and you should be nailed to a tree, and we don't want to even be seen on stage with you anymore." Give me a break. This is coming from a writer by the name of William Kilpatrick. I'm a regular reader of this fellow. He's a college professor, yet he's not a liberal college professor, which puts him in a very distinct minority. And he's writing today at Crisis about, he's titled it, "A Muslim President with a Question Mark." The correct answer in the minds of most media people is that it doesn't matter what faith a candidate holds to. To say otherwise puts one beyond the pale of polite discussion. In the multicultural society, one is supposed to assume that cultures and religions are interchangeable. I've thought about that before. It's a bit like they think you're going out and shopping for coffee. If Folgers is on sale this week, I'll buy it. Next week, if it's Maxwell House, I'll buy it. And they think that when they say that all religions are equal and that they're all true, then none of them would be true, right? If they're all true. I mean, you got to look at it in a logical sense. The writer goes on to say, to paraphrase Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make what a person believes? Maybe, he writes, we can still afford to indulge in such superficial thinking in America, but in many parts of the world, people know through hard experience that the nature of a leader's religion is a matter of great concern. No Baha'i living in Iran is foolish enough to think, quote, I don't care what the Ayatollah's religion is, unquote. No Coptic Christian in Egypt is so deluded as to think that the religious beliefs of Mohammed Morsi are of no consequence. And the writer goes on to say, it seems to me that Dr. Carson pretty much got it right. And he says, I don't know about Chuck Todd, but to most of the media elite, religion is a fuzzy feeling common to the hoi polloi about one's personal relationship with God, whoever he or she might be. Carson was reminding them that the reality is different. In the real world, different religions have different content, and content matters. We tend to give all religions, he writes, the courtesy of not questioning their dogmas because we've come to believe that all religions share the same values and the same essential truths. People who aren't particularly interested in religion are especially prone to taking this generic view of faith. And he says, for them, religion is merely a therapeutic tool which helps people feel good about themselves. In short, so long as it works for you, the content of your faith is not important. 925, Bill Colley with you. There's a great evangelist that I used to listen to on the radio on Sunday mornings. One of my former stations carried his program out of McLean Bible Church in McLean, Virginia. And I would listen to this pastor every Sunday morning while I was getting my breakfast together. And I remember, his name was Lon Solomon. He was raised Jewish, and then he became a Christian evangelical pastor, as I mentioned, and he's a tremendous public speaker. But he was explaining that he was at his workout club in suburban Washington, D.C. He said, most people, they ignore me or try to stay away from me because I'm the preacher. But he said, a guy walked up to me one day while I was on the bicycle and said, preacher, I need to talk to you. Maybe I want to come to your church. I need to get some religion in my life. And he said, well, I've got news for you. We don't do religion. He said, what do you mean? You got a church? Solomon said, well, we do personal relationships with Christ. And then the two of them started talking. Now, the guy just figured religion was something that you get that, cleans out your ears in the morning and, makes you walk a little bit more erect with your posture, and that if you get it, you won't drink so much on a Friday night and the like. The more they talked, he finally got to, mentioning that, Jesus had said, I am the way, and he went into, a bit of a dialogue about all of this. And the guy suddenly stood back and he got angry and he looked at Pastor Solomon and he said, why, that's exclusionary. So, in other words, why do you think your Christian faith's better than any other? Well, then why are you bothering to annoy Lon Solomon? Go ask the imam who's working out over on the elliptical. And this is what you've got in people in elites in this country, in mainstream media and the like. They because they don't know anything about it themselves. There's a joke going around among Catholic circles that a reporter commented during a piece yesterday on television that Pope Francis had celebrated Mass in Cuba. Well, that's the correct term, celebrated Mass. He's the celebrant in that situation. He didn't say Mass. He didn't do Mass. He didn't guide Mass. And the writer says, I've long had to deal with people in media getting it wrong. And he said, the writer said, when I was living in England, he said, we had a pope come visit England. And he said, some reporter on TV says, on live TV, he said, now the pope is being handed his crow's ear. As if a crow has, ears, yeah. Well, he meant crozier. That's that little hook, his shepherd. He's the crozier. That's what he's got in his hand, the crozier. But the guy said it was his crow's ear. And it seems to me that these people, if they're going to be covering these stories, maybe they ought to know a little bit more about what they're talking about. And so they scream and they yell about Carson and, oh, how could he say this? And how dare would he say that? And he needs to be lined up against the wall and beaten severely. Well, maybe you folks in establishment media ought to drop by a neighborhood church, and not one of those touchy-feely type churches that now are popping up for suburbanites in places like Washington and New York City. Go into an actual church. Go driving down some country road. Find some local, Southern Baptist outfit or perhaps a, Presbyterian church in America. That's the PCA. That's the conservative version. Well, it's what Presbyterianism was prior to the Auburn Declaration in 1916 or 17, when Presbyterianism split in this country, and one became the Church of Feel-Good and the other decided to stick with the Bible. Go in and actually find out what's going on in some of these places. Or actually go to a Roman Mass or an Eastern Mass, and you might get an idea, an inkling of what's going on. Talk to some of the people who are there. When they say that they believe in demons, don't mock them and don't laugh about it. You know why? Because the Bible says they exist. What pages do you think they should be tearing out to appease you? Or the Muslims, for that matter? 9:30, 53, Bill Colley with you on Top Story. Do you trust the government? Most people don't.